Welcome to this video about the implementation of the results of a policy co-creation process. The outcome of a policy co-creation process, what we in Uplift call a reflexive policy agenda, can vary quite a bit, depending on the topic and on the involved actors. The items on the agenda can range from a very practical, small-scale measure to a series of suggestions for a broader policy approach. The scope of the outcome can also vary. It could be the improvement of an existing policy tool or a brand new one for a problem which is not yet addressed by current policy. For instance, the policy agenda developed in Sfântu Gheorghe about how to improve education is broad, it's strategic, and it's long-term oriented, but it also has some short-term implementation. The long-term vision requires changes in attitude and mentality over at least 2 generations, and it aims to reduce differences between schools at all levels and ensuring that all children in Sfântu Gheorghe are enrolled and stay in the educational system until at least the 10th grade. Instead, the short-term actions that can already be implemented are, for example, organizing a follow-up for the youth board, setting up self-awareness groups in schools, or organizing reverse days where pupils become teachers, and monthly group activities like, for example, watching movies or bringing up hot topics and then discussing them. When co-creating a policy agenda and working towards its implementation, it's important to keep in mind a few things. 1, system change is hard to achieve. 2, the time horizon of policy implementation is much longer than that of co-creation. And 3, political compromise between many different interests is always necessary. With regard to the first point, that system change is hard to achieve, youth board members need to understand that changing policies is a complex and long process, with many different interests at stake. However, we should not be discouraged. Small adjustments that don't require a systemic shift, like, for example, changing the attitudes of professionals or providing better information, can still have a significant positive impact on the life chances and well-being of young people. So if changing the system seems unrealistic, the co-creation process can always focus on improving it. With regard to timing, we have to keep in mind that while a youth board might develop new proposals and recommendations in a relatively short time span, like a year or even less, the decision-making about the implementation of these proposals, let alone the implementation itself, may take years. For example, in Amsterdam, Housing Association Leven de Kei is currently planning some new housing developments in Amsterdam West. The new communal housing concept that was developed by the youth board could potentially be part of these plans. However, it will take at least a few more years before these developments will actually take place. Moreover, political compromise is always necessary. Despite its participatory nature, a reflexive policy agenda is not a legally binding, democratically agreed upon document. As a consequence, it's very unlikely that all the proposals of the youth board will be adopted by the institutional stakeholders without any further modification. When deciding about the implementation of this kind of input, the interests of young people will likely be traded off against the interests of other groups, or, for example, financial interests. It's crucial that the local public actors that are involved in any co-creation effort believe in the process and are committed to defend its results and see them through. However, it can often happen that they don't have the formal power to change the things that young people care about the most, or that they have to negotiate that power with other governance levels or other local interests. So it's important to develop objectives that can have an impact on the local level and that can be implemented by the involved partners. On the other hand, local institutional partners, ideally together with youth representatives, can also bring the more ambitious proposals to other, more appropriate and more powerful tables, and they can lobby for change based on the results of the co-creation process. So both types of objectives fit well in a reflexive policy agenda. Having said this, implementation can happen. In the 4 Uplift locations, the local co-creation teams are working to integrate the components of the agendas into official local policy. In particular, in Tallinn, the results of the process have led to the restructuring of national services for NEET youth. The new service has been co-created, tested, and validated by young people, thanks to the involvement of the municipality of Tallinn. The most important result for any co-creation process is to achieve a change of mindset, where the necessity of participatory and co-creative approaches for policymaking becomes clear to the decision makers and the local administrators. The ultimate goal should be to permanently embed a youth board into the existing policymaking structure. The key to this is to show institutional actors what is the value of co-creation. From our experience, the first benefit of this participatory approach is to foster a very much needed direct interaction between decision makers and policy target groups, in particular, young people. From this interaction, local administrators can gain important knowledge and a greater understanding of their target group. And since reflexive policymaking is a cross-sectoral approach, it also helps to improve cooperation between different institutional actors. And finally, the decision makers can learn to listen more attentively to their target group and to their experiences in the life world, and they can become more open to alternative policy-making approaches. However, aside from policy change, co-creation also has value per se for the participants, in our case, young people. Through the process, they have the opportunity to learn new skills, to get a better grasp of the functioning of the system world, and to gain more confidence in their potential agency. And this leads to an overall empowerment for them. In the case of Uplift, we can say that the co-creation process was undeniably successful in terms of transforming the attitudes of both groups. And the fact that initiatives to continue with reflexive policymaking for young people are being pursued in all 4 locations is a clear testament to this success.